So, yeah, yeah. So back into the commission meeting, and I'd like to recognize Chairman Box of the Boating and Law Enforcement Committee.
Thank you, Chairman. Call on. Oh, thank you. Let's see, Lieutenant. Oh, we don't need to call him, do we? Lieutenant. No, we don't need to. We just need to go. We made a recommendation.
No.
No.
Call him at least.
Call him.
Oh, okay. Please.
Okay. The Voting and Law Enforcement Committee made a vote to pass Proclamation 1805, manner and means taking and trapping. Is there any discussion?
Well, thank you, Chairman Box, and sorry for the confusion. So I have a motion for approval. I have a second from the second. So any discussion from the commission? Commissioner Swan.
During muzzleloading season, I would like to propose an amendment to propose the use of single-shot handguns and single-shot shotguns along with muzzleloaders.
All right, do we have a second to Commissioner Swan's amendment? Second. So discussion on the use of single-shot handguns and shotguns. So discussion on Commissioner Swan's amendment.
If I'm asked, let me ask this question. You got
He's done the two of them now.
Don King.
Use Kent's.
Whichever one you.
Can I talk?
Single shot rifles, single shot
Pistol.
but this is during
shotgun.
muzzleloader
Yes.
only.
Yes.
Right? Okay. That's all. Simple question.
Yeah. In other words, it would.
Amen.
I guess you would define it as a primitive weapon season then,
I got it.
or whatever you want to call it. You could call it muzzleloading or whatever.
Commissioner Holbert.
Chairman Cook, I'd like Kate to clarify something. I know several commissioners received a phone call stating that Colonel Taylor had made a statement that the agency would support this. I would like him to clarify the agency's position, and I don't think that statement was true.
Yes, I don't know when that statement was alleged to have been made, but we went through a committee, our Manner and Means Committee, and nobody on that committee wanted to bring forward any changes to our current definition of muzzleloader in the muzzleloader season we have now, which is a firearm that's incapable of being loaded from the breech. You cannot load it that way. And we chose unanimously across the state, all 4 regions, the law enforcement personnel that are on that committee had been vetted through their districts and regions, and it was unanimous that nobody had any recommendation to change the current muzzleloader season.
So it's unanimous.
It was across the board from our committee.
Also, I want to make clear that if this passes, you would be able to hunt, unless we create a primitive weapons license, you would be able to hunt during muzzleloader season without buying a muzzleloader stamp. So, unless we make that very clear. So I would just express my opposition to this. Thank you.
Commissioner McLaren.
So the way our current license structure is, if I have a muzzleloader tag, or if I'm legal to hunt in muzzleloader season with whatever weapon it is, can I then go into rifle season and use that same, if I'm using my muzzleloader weapon, can I go right on in and hunt the rest of the season with just that one tag?
Yes, if you're hunting, to go back to the beginning, if you're hunting with archery equipment, you can hunt then with muzzleloader during the muzzleloader season and the modern rifle. You can hunt with a muzzleloader during the modern rifle season, but you can't go backwards and hunt with a rifle during the muzzleloader.
So then what this is saying then, if I buy my muzzleloader tag and I'm hunting with my single shot rifle, that's the only tag I've got to buy, because I can hunt right on through.
As it stands now, that would be the case because it's by weapon, not by season.
Okay.
If you understand what I'm saying?
Right, that looks to me like that'd be.
So if you could hunt with a single shot, or shotgun during the muzzleloader season without buying that tag, you could go into gun season with your 09 and hunt with the same one, the way it's set up currently.
Okay, well, I would be opposed to this also.
Point of clarification, did you get any comments between the last meeting and this meeting concerning the use of that? I know the Wildlife Federation has proposed it.
We had 6 that oppose shotguns and other weapons added to the muzzleloader season. We had 6 to allow single shot rifles, shotguns, and muzzleloaders. So it was a total wash, 6 and 6. And this was in the one that was most recently conducted.
That would again echo my opinion of why we would want to do it when it's totally even, but.
You're questioning why would we want to do it. Commissioner Cox?
I'm kind of going to agree with both sides. In the effort to, we got an email, if you didn't look at it, the muzzleloader licenses have dropped from, I'm going to get this wrong exactly, but from, let's say, 30 or 35 or 40,000 down to 19,000 or 18,000, whatever it was last year. Some of it could be sportsmen's and lifetime licenses, but we're obviously losing hunters. So this might get some back into it. However, it's going to cost us money if we don't change our license package, how it's identified. So Kurt's correct. We cannot do this year because, in my opinion, because I think while I would vote for it, we need to change our licenses. And the discussion about licenses we had before, if we can do that this summer, I think this is one of the things that needs to be addressed, so we might want to do this, or whoever's here next year might want to take a look at it. But I can't vote for it because of the way the licenses are right now.
Thank you. Any other comments from the commission? Well, as I said a month or two ago, I am opposed to this. We have an archery season, then you transition to a muzzleloader season, and then you have a rifle season. And the problem with me, maybe it's too pragmatic, but it says muzzleloader season, which is for using a muzzleloader, and anything else is not a muzzleloader. And we have about the numbers have gone from in the last 5 years from 24,000 to 19,000 in the last 5 years. But we don't know. I'm talking about the muzzleloader license sales. But you're right. We don't know what of those are sportsman's license, what are lifetime license. So I'm not sure that we can even judge off that. But either way, we have roughly 20,000 votes for muzzleloader season, and we have, I will say, the guys who have been pushing this for the last 3 years, they have really worked hard. They've done a great job at trying to support their position, and I know more about ballistics and rifles now than I ever knew. So they've really tried. They've done what they should do. But we also have done what we should do as a commission. We've listened to their arguments. We've talked to other states. We've really studied this for 3 years, and I see no reason to do anything other than muzzleloader in the muzzleloader season. I think it's a mistake, and I think we would. Another issue that's a little bit hard to quantify, but it's a big tradition for a lot of folks, and just sort of what we've seen from Cheatham, traditions matter, and so I'm opposed to this. So any other discussion? Commissioner Box?
Cox. I also received several emails concerning the primitive weapons used during muzzleloader. They really want to keep that season sacred to muzzleloader only. So I'm opposed to it as well.
Commissioner Swan.
I've just got one more comment, and that is as you well know, the Wildlife Federation's put a lot of work into this, and I felt like that they deserved an up or down vote on it.
I agree. I appreciate the discussion. It's great that's what this is about, to explain our positions and to represent the constituents. So thank you for that. So any discussion from the public? Yes, sir.
Clarence Dye, Lebanon, Tennessee. I represent the Tennessee Firearms Association. And I've been a muzzleloader hunter ever since they opened the season here in Tennessee many years ago. To me, it's a primitive weapons hunt. I hunt on my own property. I built my own muzzleloaders to hunt with. Wear my old buckskin clothes when I hunt on my own property, and to me, that's what it's about. There's a lot of other opportunities for rifle hunters. They could use a shotgun if they want to on rifle seasons. A lot of states that are real flat country states like Illinois and places like that, they can only use shotguns because of the safety issues, but leave our primitive weapons hunt just like they are. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dice. Any other comments from the public? Any other comments from the commission? So a yes vote for this means that we will change the muzzleloader season to allow the use of single-shot pistols and single-shot shotguns. And a no vote means that the muzzleloader season will not allow the use of single-shot pistols and single-shot shotguns. So all in favor, voting yes to allow these weapons in the muzzleloader, let it be known by saying aye. All opposed? The noes have it. The amendment does not pass. So any further discussion on Proclamation 1805? Commissioner Sanders?
I just have one question about the synthetic urine. How is that going to be enforced from a law enforcement standpoint?
Well, we went to our forensics personnel, Mike Stockdale, and there are ability to have test kits on that to determine whether it's urine or not urine. A lot of it will be determined based off of, what we see there at the site and being what bottle it's in, but that is problematic. But we do have the ability to buy test kits to tell, and it'll signal that it is a urine based on the urea in it and so on, that tells us it is urine, or if it's synthetic, nothing will show up. There'll be no reactivity.
So just to make sure, we're probably going to be looking at getting test kits at some point in the future. Because, I mean, if I'm using it, I'm going to take it out of the bottle I buy at the sporting goods store.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I don't need it. I think it's, what you're asking is good, but I think it's more important. When we pass this, and this is put out to the public, we need to talk about CWD in the next sentence, whoever's gonna print it. The press release needs to say why we're doing this. So the public is educated, the hunters are educated, and hopefully they'll be ethical enough to self-control doing what they're doing, if they can even buy they got a year to do it, so hopefully they can do that. But that needs to be an educational process more than it does an enforcement.
That's a great point. Thank you.
And I agree. I don't like passing rules that are not enforceable, and so I just want to make sure we had a plan to enforce. That's all.
Commissioner Woodson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is related to, for those of you who have your iPads, in section 1, I guess subsection 9A, it relates to using air guns in archery season. I'm going to make a motion to delete that section and anything related to the use of that weapon during archery season. I'd like to make that motion. I would like to share with y'all the reasons why I've come to that decision. Number one, and I think that this is important, I reviewed the testimony from the legislative process to really understand more about the subject, which I was very ignorant about before this process. Have received hundreds, actually, emails on this topic from constituents that I have not done a formal tally, but I would say if I have received a letter of support, it might be one or two. Every other has been opposed to this. Actually, constituents of mine, not just Tennesseans, but in the 5th District.
Yeah, most of the ones I got were out of the state.
And during the testimony, and even today from the gentleman who's lobbying for air guns, he called the weapon an air gun. In my mind, and I think really simply about these matters, bows are used in archery. That seems like a simple concept. During the testimony, and even today, this weapon is not a bow. That's what I heard. I agree. When a weapon that is not a bow can so easily be modified that it can shoot a lead projectile and have a range that is very easily extended, it raises concerns to me. So I think, one, just the sheer usage of a type of weapon that isn't a bow in archery causes me pause. Secondly, I think back to constituent input. We just had, I think, a really thoughtful conversation about muzzleloader season and the history behind these things and the traditions. And while I am not an avid, I'm certainly not a successful bow hunter. I may be avid, but that is a really treasured part of our hunting traditions. And the constituents who have, to a person, communicated with me have all been opposed to this measure. And I think third and finally, I think this is really important. I reflect on this commission's and this agency's priority of supporting opportunities for our disabled sportsmen. It's been a priority to this commission in every possible way, whether it's access or it's quality of experience. We have built blinds, we've created stand opportunities, we've created hunting zones, we've built piers, we've built ramps. This commission, and maybe with a few exceptions, every member of this commission prioritized ADA compliance ahead of what was required and actually invested funding for this agency for that purpose to make sure that our citizens with disabilities were taken care of. And that's really important. Commissioner Cannon, one of our former chairmen, actually took donations in personal investment from members of this commission to support improved opportunities for access for our sportsmen. This has been a consistent priority for us. This is a different matter because it is a weapon, and it's an accommodation on a weapon. And in the 6 years I've been on this commission, we've never been asked to make an accommodation on a weapon. And because of all of the information that I've gained, I feel like I've really studied hard on it. I am not going to be able to support that provision, which is why I'm making this motion, Mr. Chairman. And it is out of tremendous respect and a continued desire to absolutely double down on opportunities to expand and enjoy for our disabled hunters. But with the exception of the manufacturer of this, which I do not have any problem with folks in the business of sporting. It's a huge benefit to our economy, and it's a wonderful thing, and I support it for the rifle season. But I'm just concerned about it in archery, and I think that this is something that you can't reel back, and based on our history, it's just inconsistent with how we've done business, and I would just respectfully want to talk about that. I apologize for not bringing it up yesterday, but I'm not on the committee, and I wanted to respect the committee process and certainly have a great deal of respect for the members of the committee, but wanted to share those thoughts and make the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner Woodson. So we have a motion. Do we have a second? Have a second from Commissioner Box. So discussion on the amendment to not allow air guns during the archery season. Commissioner Gardner.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like, Cape, if you could, just explain what it takes to get a disabled permit and what the varieties of a disabled permit are and the qualifications and the process you go through to get one.
Cape, I can do that if you want me to.
I have the numbers
Okay,
here. The process may have to be explained more, what they have to submit. These are the type 168 disabled under 18 license, the type 169 intellectual disability, which there were 280 of those sold. The 189 permanent wheelchair license, there were 1,632 of those sold. And the 198 permanent disabled veteran, there were 17,599 of those sold. That gives us the numbers as far as they have to send in and prove that they have these disabilities. They're not bought over the counter, so it would be something they would have to send in documentation to prove.
Commissioner Swan.
You know, personally, as a commissioner, I think this commission should do everything it could to encourage people with special needs, our veterans who come home from war with injuries, any opportunity possible to be able to get out and hunt and fish. And I think an airbow during archery season for somebody with disabilities or special needs would be a great plus.
Commissioner Holbert.
Director Carter, can I ask you a question? I think you'll know the answer. Anyway, I've had some people call me in the past, such as doing hunts for Catch a Dream or those organizations that do hunts for these kids maybe with terminal illness or a real serious illness, asking if they could use a gun during bow season or a gun during muzzleloader to move their hunt up. That is not possible, right? We've had to tell them no, they could not do that, right?
Make sure I'm
Okay.
check with Tracy. here,
That would be
but
allowing them to use a different weapon in a similar to what Commissioner Woodson.
we can make allowances for those special needs for weapons types, but we can't do outside season.
Right, that's what I'm saying, outside of that season. Okay.
I'm confused, Director Carter. So could you restate that?
If you meet a certain criteria, that being you're a facility that handles personnel who are disabled in certain ways, on that property, you can allow people to hunt with a different weapon. For instance, you can hunt with a rifle in archery season, but we couldn't change the dates of the season, but we could change what we can allow on that property of a organization that meets the criteria to be able to make that request.
And that's made through an organization, not through an individual?
Correct.
How often does that happen?
We usually get 1 to 2 a year.
Commissioner Swan?
One other thing, we talk about tradition. What about the use of rangefinders, spotting scopes, climbing stands, trail cameras, crossbows, compound bows? You know, do we want to just go back to a longbow season? I don't know that this is I don't understand the huge issue of allowing somebody with special needs or disability to use an airbow during archery season.
Thank you. Commissioner Cox?
If this was for archery season for non-disabled, I agree completely with Commissioner Woodson, but I can't, for a disabled person, sometimes you can't cock a crossbow or pull a compound bow, and I got the same letters I think that everybody got from a lot of different people about the sanctity of archery season. I certainly understand that, but this is a disabled license, and I don't see where it's going to hurt the sport. So I would support like the agency's got it.
I feel like a lot of the comments I got as well were people who were confused, thinking that this meant that they could use a air rifle through the archery season, and I don't think that a lot of people recognize that it was for disabled people only.
One last thing, when I emailed some of these people back from all over the U.S. who wrote the form letter to all of us and told them it was just for disabled hunters, they were like, oh, well, we didn't realize that. That's okay.
Any other comments from the commission? Commissioner Sanders?
I want to make sure, you said 18,000 disabled veterans, or 17,900 and something? 1,632 wheelchair?
Yes, it was
Yeah.
17,500 and I believe it was 79 DAV,
Okay,
1,632 permanent wheelchair, intellectual disabled 280, and I don't have the exact number on disabled under 18, but it was small.
okay. So if my math's right, that's roughly 20,000. So these people would be eligible to use the airbow under the proposed rule?
That's correct. Those persons that fall within that category of licensure.
Any idea how often those folks are successful?
No idea.
Commissioner Gardner?
Thank you, Chairman. One more follow-up to the license issue. A disabled license enables that license holder to hunt, fish, or do whatever in Tennessee. Is that correct? It's not a specific, it's not a hunting or a big game disabled license.
It covers all. Is that right, Susie?
It does cover all big game, but it does not cover WMA.
It would,
Okay.
the permitting, you would have to get extra the WMA.
So with that in mind, we have no idea how many of these license holders are strictly just fishing, for instance.
We really don't know that. It could be, a lot of those are just fishing.
Thank you.
One last question. Do you feel like the allowance of airbows during archery season for disabled people and people with special needs would get more hunters into the woods who fall into that category?
It would just be an assumption. I don't know, Commissioner Swan.
Any other discussion from the commission?
Just to.
Commissioner Woodson?
Thank you. And this is just to, in terms of what other states have this consistent policy. And this was something that one of our colleagues sent around, a website that has all the different legislation. Sure. Oh, yeah. So, and just as an example, with white-tailed deer, we would be one of 2 states in the country that would have this specific policy. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 7 to 9 states that actually approve it for all of the season. And so I just, to my knowledge, I haven't, if anybody's received letters from disability coalitions, this is a business issue. Different weapons have come in to seasons. I would suspect, and we won't be here, I would suspect that the next policy that will be recommended, and by the way, this is not related to the legislative debate, it's just based on the history of the lobbying community, understandably wanting to expand opportunities to have a new kind of weapon in a new season. Makes perfect sense from a business perspective. So I'm talking more from the responsibilities that I might have. It would be completely understandable as it happened with the crossbow, as an example, which I would have supported for all hunters had I been on the commission at that time, because it is a bow during archery season. But the goal for the manufacturers of this item, which appears to be a fantastic piece of equipment, the goal is to have it in all hunting opportunities. This is a strategy. It's a very good strategy, but it is a strategy. And so if the disability community were making this recommendation broadly, I just, if anybody has received a letter from the disability community, I would just love to see it, because I did not. It's understandably a business decision, but I just want us to be eyes wide open on what we're really talking about. And if it's the debate to have it for archery season broadly, then that's an important debate for this commission to have. But the strategy is a strategy legislatively, and not necessarily legislatively, apologize, from the manufacturer. So I just want us to go eyes wide open.
Thank you. Commissioner Swan?
To further add to this, my wife and I are co-chairs of a Safari Club committee called Pathfinder. And Pathfinder is a committee that seeks out people with special needs, veterans with disabilities and so forth. And we work with these people, and we bring them into this program that we have through Safari Club, and then we have we send 2 of them to Africa, all expenses paid, taxidermy, airfare, caregiver with them, and we work with a whole lot of people with special needs. And I can tell you, an airbow would be a great asset to a lot of these people that we've worked with. One of the guys who went to Africa 3 years ago, who wants to be the first disabled person to get the Big 5, is in a wheelchair, and he has to sit back like this. And when he eats, he has to take a spoon. Somebody has to bend a spoon for him and help him so he can put the food in his mouth. So these are the kind of people we're talking about trying to aid with the use of an airbow. And just because Tennessee might be the first or one of the first doesn't necessarily make it wrong. I mean, there's innovations that come along all the time, just like when we went from the use of long bows to compound bows to crossbows. So in my heart, I want to help these people, and that's the way I feel.
You make good points, Commissioner Swan. Any other comments from the commission? How about comments from the public?
Could I ask
Commissioner Stroud?
No, I just wanted some clarification. So we're talking about this thing being used only for the disabled, nothing else, right? So
That's during archery season.
during archery
It
season?
would be,
Yes.
as proposed, it would be legal during the rifle season.
Yes, okay, all right, just, it's a shame, I think, it's a shame to not, in my opinion, not to give them the opportunity to fool with this stuff, with these things or not. I just, it's easy, I think, Bill, when we're talking, it's easy for me to say, well, you know what, yes or no, and no big deal, but it's a big deal to maybe some of these people, which I'd hate to not let them have the opportunity.
Mr. Holbert?
Clarification on the amendment. Does this include the air guns during rifle season, or is this just, okay?
No, sir.
Just air bows during-
It's air guns during archery season only. That's the only component of my amendment. Airborne. Well, I'm using the term that the gentleman who manufactures them use,
Right.
air gun,
It
is what
actually-
he called it.
Says we had to rename that as air guns using a bolt, so it does fit what you're saying. If you read, it says a pre-charged pneumatic gun which shoots an arrow, because it's actually a gun that shoots an arrow as it's ballistic.
To the extent that if anybody doesn't know, they're not familiar with the equipment, we do have a video that advertises the weapon. If anybody would like to see what it is, if they're not sure, it's queued up. But
I
I'm
think
not
that'd
going
be
to
a good
request it.
idea.
Yeah,
Let's see it.
please, let's see
Because
that,
up
please.
until Commissioner Woodson brought it up, I never really thought of the concept that it says gun. It doesn't say air bow, it says air gun that shoots an arrow. So that's it. It's really conflicting in me.
Commissioner Holbert?
Kate, just one point of clarification, and maybe to solve some confusion. Airbow, that's more of a brand, right? I think
That's the
where
reason we went with a pneumatic air gun that shoots a bolt, because that is actual, a brand name, Airbow.
Commissioner Stroud?
I make a motion to take the air gun and shoot the guy that did the music for that.
Yeah. Second? Yeah.
Hey, Jeff, I noticed that Jim Shockey had to use 2 shots with it. When I killed my bison, I used 1 shot with my
There you
compound
go.
bow.
As we would expect. Way to go. So, any comments from the commission?
2 quick comments. And I've responded to most of my emails with I could support the language for, as it's proposed now. I do have 2 concerns. One, the way the crossbow went. I remember being at the Hunter Education Workshop as an instructor when crossbows were introduced, knowing that they had been only for disabled people for years. Where does this stop? I don't know. And the other thing is I'm real concerned. I know what they have to submit information stuff here, but I see how easily handicapped the label to get permission to park or to use certain equipment has been abused in the past. And even though this is a special license that comes through the agency, it still concerns me. I'm sure, Jeff, you've had many people ask you for something so you could get the permission to use crossbows years ago. So it's something I want to make sure that if we are going to truly limit it to the 4 types that we have now, that there is truly a vetting process in that. And I don't know if, maybe I can't say that because that may put a burden on you guys, but that's my big concern.
Well, I agree. It was very easy on the crossbow deal. That just was you could just say your shoulder hurt. But this is much more. It's like a VA rating for the disabled veterans. So that's a much more specific rating.
And that's the one, that's the almost 18,000, again, I'm not, don't want to get, I mean, I do hunts for warriors and things like that. That's not what I'm getting at. There's 18,000 of those. Confined to a wheelchair, I get. Mental incapacity, or not, whatever the term was. Intellectual. Again, I can understand that. So understanding that there is a VA rating, a certain rating to get this license.
That criteria is 30%.
30%?
30% disability by reason of war service time. Or 100% service.
Okay, so just to make sure, 30% or more by reason of a conflict, war. Okay, or 100% disability as determined. Okay.
A 30% disability is a fairly significant impairment. It'd be reasonable to not expect someone to draw a bow. I mean, depending on what it is, but 30% would be a significant injury.
I've got a beautiful crossbow that I don't like to use because it's a challenge to use, and especially the decocking side. So I understand, and if it's truly going to be limited to people with impairments, I still think I can support the language, but I am concerned.
Any other discussion from the commission? Any discussion from the audience?
My name is Randall Rainey. What I had originally asked is this be used in just the archery season only for disabled people. There's not enough tools in the toolbox. If there's one that comes out tomorrow, it should be considered for our disabled. I wouldn't want to be in that category. And the rest of the season, put the airbow or the device into the general gun. That's what I'm asking for. And I think it's fair.
And for clarity, so do we have the projectile, the arrow projectile for the disabled during archery, but you're proposing a gun, you know, not the arrow projectile during rifle season.
Right, well, take the same device, the airbow, call it an airbow, it's a brand, and put it in general gun season. But only during archery season, let the people with disabilities use it. That's my proposal.
Thank you.
Fair enough?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Rainey, will the same weapon fire a bolt and a bullet?
No, sir. The airbow is a brand. It will only fire a 26-inch bolt.
Okay. An entirely different weapon that fires a bullet. Okay.
It takes 1.5 pounds of pressure with your index and your thumb to cock it versus a crossbow. You know how hard a crossbow is to cock.
Thank you. It's a good process. Yeah, I just wanted to make, Commissioner Holbert has clarified for me as well, just to make absolutely sure what we're discussing to strike. Currently, we have approved using the pneumatic weapon, shooting a bolt by disabled individuals in the bow season only. That's what has been approved. And that's what we're discussing to strike now. So a yes vote is to strike that amendment. So I think we're ready to vote unless there's any further discussion from the commission. All in favor of striking the amendment to use the pneumatic weapon during the bow season for disabled individuals, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
The amendment does not pass. Any more discussion on Proclamation 1805?
For clarity, we did make a change and put the wording in there on the beginning of this. It has a manometer on it, which is an air pressure gauge, so that it would be required to have the air pressure gauge on that. And per yesterday's amendment, we added the trapping language that was requested. Is that all that was the amendments there were? That's all I could remember.
Do you remember anymore? That's what he listed right there. Yep. I believe that's it, unless anyone remembers anything else.
Is this on the proclamation?
Yes. No, we're done with the amendment, back to the main proclamation.
Is this a proclamation that deals with blaze orange?
That's a state law, Commissioner.
State law, okay.
Yeah. It's 74-124, I believe, is that law. I'm sorry, I didn't.
That's all right.
And I'm sorry, I don't remember. Where did we leave the discussion at the end of the areas of the state that are, you know, Arkansas is on the east side of the river, and
We were going to have to do, we would have to go and do that as a rule, amend the rule, the CWD rule, to include that in there, that we could craft some language that would be able to allow someone who was hunting in a part of another state that had to traverse through Tennessee to get back to their home state, that would allow that. And as we would include the notification of dispatch and so on like that.
And can we, we'll do that in July then, and have that, can we have that ready by this season?
That's more of a Tracy question, probably.
Once it's written, it has to be filed for 50 days. And it's set for a hearing after that. It has to go to the AG's office and take 7 months.
We can get the process started in July. So Director Carter, if we could please add that for July. So So any more discussion on Proclamation 1806? My glasses on. 1805. No? So all in favor of approval of Proclamation 1805, let it be known by saying aye. Any opposed? The proclamation passes.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Thank you, Kate. And thank you, Chairman Box. So that completes the Voting Law Enforcement Committee, and we're in the home stretch now. So Commissioner Sanders is going to take the Budget Committee from here, and since we didn't do this yesterday, we'll do this as a full commission. And Commissioner Sanders, thank you.
Well, now that we've got all the, boring stuff out of the way, now we can get into the budgets, right?
Only a CPA could say that.
Non-controversial stuff out of the way.
All right. And just as a heads up to the presenters, we're actually going to change the order up just a little bit, just don't anybody run out thinking they're number 6, because you may be number 3 now. So the first one is Colonel Ryder to present budget expansion for the big project in Knoxville.
Thank you, Commissioner Sanders. This is a budget request expansion for $400,000. This award is underneath the Boating Infrastructure Grant, which is our big program. The recipient of this grant will be the city of Knoxville, and this project will renovate the transient docks and gangways on the Tennessee River, known as the Vol Navy docks there in downtown Knoxville, Tennessee. This is also, this money is 100% federal money, with all the match being provided by the recipient.
All right, so
Motion for approval.
we have a motion for approval. Do we have a second? We have a second from Commissioner Gardner. Any discussions from the audience?
If I interrupt, just for clarification, this is a full commission vote discussion, so everybody free to.
This is not just the committee, this is full commission. Seeing no discussions, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, number 2 is Pandy English. Go ahead, Pandy.
Thank you, Chairman Sanders. Commissioners, I am Pandy English, the Assistant Chief of Biological Diversity, and this is a budget expansion request for the Environmental Services Division of $21,000. This is 100% federal money from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for us to conduct deep pool mussel surveys in the Clinch River. These funds will also be used for propagation, culture, and genetics research in support of rare mussel recovery.
Motion for approval.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. Discussion? Questions? From the audience? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not sure if we're doing so well or everybody's wanting to leave. We patiently waited for 2 days for this. All right, David McKinney is going to pinch hit for Tim Churchill on the next one. This is number 3 in your book, your agenda.
Commissioners, thank you. We have acquired properties on the Cumberland Plateau in Morgan and Scott counties. One is Gunsight Mountain, the other one is the McCart Track. These properties have abandoned gas and oil wells on them that need to be properly closed before we can invite the public in to utilize these grounds. Would ask that you consider expanding budget 3708 in the amount of $460,000 so that we can close these wells out. I would tell you that the well closure is part of this cost, but some of these old wells, we've had to redo the roads and the access because they're so old it's grown back over. So there's access, there's the bid package preparation, and determining how deep some of these wells are. Wells in Tennessee generally are from 2,000 to 6,000 feet max. We have several here that are in the 4,000 foot range. So it's going to take some work to properly close them out.
Got to get a motion first, right? Have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. All right, discussions? Commissioner Holbert.
My question is, is this, obviously they've got some kind of cap over them now, I would guess. They're not open.
That's correct.
Okay. Are we, is this something we're required to do by law, or is this something we're just doing?
No,
if they're covered now, why spend $460,000 more dollars?
We spent a lot of time trying to understand this issue before we even took it to staff. Tennessee requires, under the gas and oil regs, that wells be bonded to close them out. Tennessee is one of almost all states where the bond is set by a gas and oil board with the consent of the General Assembly. And so the value of the bond set for these wells is always less than it costs to close them out. In Tennessee, the cost of actually closing a well is about 5 times more than the bond that's posted. On the other end of the spectrum, you have West Virginia, Pennsylvania, some other states where the cost of actually closing the well is 15 times what the bond amount is. And so, and that's just for wells that are not pre-law. So we have a mixture of pre-law and bonded wells here. But the bond amount of $3,000 wouldn't even get you to some of these places.
Okay. Do we own the mineral rights on all those properties?
That's a good question. I don't know if we own the gas and oil rights on all those properties or not.
If we don't, it's not their responsibility, whoever owns those rights?
In the bonding process, you would think that would be the case. But generally, where the bond actually is used to close the well, it's on private property, and public access is not an issue.
Did we buy the bond when we bought the property, or didn't the bonding company have to stand up if they've defaulted on the bond? I know that works in the construction business.
That would be a question for Tim Churchill. I'm not sure what arrangement he entered into when he actually purchased that property.
Is this something we could defer to the next meeting till we get some more information on?
Well, here's where we are. We've gone through the process of working with the Gas and Oil Board and the gas and oil inspectors from TDEC to make sure that we wrote the bid specifications in a way that would properly close those wells. As I said, some of them are very deep and some of them are very high pressure. We have let the bids and the contracts have been awarded. The agency cannot enter into the contract until money is in the budget to do so. So we've gone through the process. The only thing left to be done is enter into a contract. If you want to defer doing that, that's certainly at your discretion.
Do we own the wells? Right. We don't know if we own. But we don't know that. Okay.
Good question.
Commissioner Swan.
If I understand you correctly, included in this is improving the roads into that area to close these oil and gas wells. And would that also provide access for hunters and so forth? into these areas?
Would need to visit that with the WMA managers to see what their desires are, but in theory, yes. I mean, you're talking about improving the road sufficiently to get some significantly large and heavy equipment in there.
Commissioner Cox?
I know you're at a disadvantage because Tim's not here, but how did we buy property that had this liability on it? Was that something that was negotiated in the price, or did we know it was there, and why did we buy it with this liability on it? And second question, if you said they're still under pressure, are the gas wells still potentially producing gas, natural gas?
To answer your first question, I think this is characteristic of buying property on the Cumberland Plateau. We have bought properties that are now in the North Cumberland Wildlife Management Area that have open mine portals. We've closed probably a dozen of those. They have some old gas and oil wells on them that are still producing. And on the North Cumberland, there's hundreds of miles of high wall. Some of these high walls are 100, 120 feet tall. So we buy property routinely that has significant liability associated with it, but we then endeavor to make it as safe for the public to utilize as possible. As far as the utility of these wells, they're still, for instance, the oil wells may not be producing oil anymore. The only thing coming out of that strata may be salt water, but there is a tremendous amount of gas that is liberated from the gas and oil bearing zones that are in those strata. It may be 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet, but they liberate gas, and that's what keeps those wells under pressure. It is not unusual for people to shoot a hole in a capped well and then light it on fire. I think John Mike will tell you they are called the eternal flames in the North Cumberlands. To properly close these wells, there needs to be nothing left above ground that can be vandalized. And that's what that's in the specifications to do this work.
It would seem to me that we need to find out who owns the mineral rights, and if there's still gas that can be produced, why would we cap a well that could produce a steady income? And back up to how we bought the land. If we, in private purchases of land, you typically don't buy land with an environmental problem on it until it's cured. So, Director Carter, thank you.
I just want to mention two things, Commissioner. One, I'd ask Dave to really give the explanation, but we do look at those lands when we buy any land. We have what's called either Phase 1 or Phase 2 study done by an outside contractor to tell us what possible contaminants are there. And we have turned down land before where those studies come back, turned down land that wanted to be donated to us. We've also not made purchases where we thought that was going to be a problem. So I would just defer to Dave for a second in terms of buying those properties. Your other question about gas and oil, when we last approached that with the last administration, not this one, but at the last administration, there was a big discrepancy in determining where that money would go. If there was money that was made from those, would it go back into the general fund or would it come to the agency? Then the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service got involved because it became a program income for anything that came off of lands that were bought with PR funds. So it got pretty complicated. So at the very end, we were told, stop. Don't go any further in terms of trying to get money from mineral extraction to come back to the agency or to the state until some administrative policies changed. And to my knowledge, that's never changed. But I would go back to Dave on the Phase 1, Phase 2, if you just a quick explanation on that, Dave. Mr. Chairman, if that's okay.
Yeah, the Phase 1 audits that were done on these properties disclosed the locations of the wells, the approximate depth and age of the wells. The decision to buy these was made with that information in hand. I would say that with regard to these wells, the companies that originally put them in, if they were still capable of producing a product that had value, they would still be in production. They have been essentially abandoned because they're no longer profitable.
Chairman Cook.
So, Director Carter, I would assume that the Gas and Oil Board and all the process they went through to get to where we are today, surely somebody knows who, they must have checked to see that we have authority over the wells or own the wells, or surely.
We just confirmed that we do own the mineral rights on both of those properties.
Wasn't it I remember when you said, I think it's the current administration 4 or 5 years ago or 6 years ago is who told us to stop looking.
Actually, it's back during the Bredesen administration.
Okay.
Yes,
Don't you think it would be wise to do a little bit of investigating on the pressured wells and see if they're worth production and go back to the current administration just to ask the question? I mean, I don't know what they produce, but I wish I had a natural gas well. I mean, that sounds funny, but I'm serious. I mean, if there's 10 wells up there that have pressure enough to produce something, maybe it's worth putting a tank up there and capturing it.
Where it really got into a lot of discussion again was during the Bredesen administration, it was all related to coal.
Right.
And that's understandable with all the conversation now related to coal and still ongoing. On the gas issues, it became a thing about fracking and what would be allowed, because we felt pretty strongly that we could have a significant income off of one or two of our properties in terms of natural gas, as Arkansas does. Arkansas gets a tremendous amount of money from their gas wells on their WMAs. Point well taken. It might be well to go back and just see what the climate is in terms of going forward, if that's even acceptable to look at anymore. Somebody will have to answer that question if it does come up. Where does the money go?
Might mention, Commissioners, that particularly the wells on the McCart track, we're not allowing the public onto those tracks because of those wells. But all of the old headworks were still there. The piping, the tanks, the pumps, everything's still on that property. The connecting lines between the wells, the collection and discharge point where they loaded the product. And Vinland is still in business up in Kentucky. We asked them if they wanted to come and get that equipment before we closed out the wells. And their response was, it's junk, it's not worth our time to come get it. So those wells are not going back into production without a tremendous investment. And if there were profit to be made from that, I think they would still be in production.
You know, it could be that it's not up to their profit margin to fool with it. They're looking for something that's a major producer where we're perhaps not as particular about how much profit margin, so it's profit.
David, unless it's going to put us at a disadvantage in the contracts, I would move, unless there's objection from the commission, to table this until July to give us time to maybe explore some of these. That's 60 days roughly before the next meeting, to explore some of these questions, which seem to be pretty significant, before we move forward on this.
Certainly. So, I mean, the goal here is to make these properties accessible to the public with as few problems as possible. But as the commissioners, as questions occur to you, if you would send those to us, or maybe anyway, let us know what questions you have, and that's what we'll work on for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
All right, we're going to move to budget expansion number 6. Greg?
Yeah, good afternoon, Commissioners. My name is Greg Wathen. I work in the Director's Office. I don't know most of you. I know Commissioner Cox from years back, but glad to be here. This is a request for $150,000 budget expansion. It's money coming from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. For the last number of years, a lot of my work has been done in the Southeast, working with other Southeast states on a Southeast Conservation Adaptation Strategy. And I've worked under a cooperative agreement with the Fish and Wildlife Service to try to look at landscapes across the Southeast, including Tennessee, and figuring out what those landscapes are going to look like in the future with urban growth and things like that. This money will be used to issue a couple of contracts to help us to integrate the state wildlife action plans. Tennessee has one, the other Southeast states do as well, into a blueprint that we've developed through the Southeast Conservation Adaptation Strategy. It's all 100% federal funds, and we would request your approval for this budget expansion to move forward with that project. Glad to take any questions you might have.
Do we have a motion? Second? All right, any questions from the commission? Comments from the public? All right, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Tennessee and other southeastern states, yes. Thanks, sir.
All right, number 5, Frank, you get to finish this out, kind of. Like the rest of the committees, I'm saving the best to last.
Fisheries always gets last.
Well, it's a bad day to have a lot of presentations, because I know we've been here a while. But I do have a couple. One's more exciting than the other, maybe. But the first one is this Paris Landing Fishing Pier. Back in December, the commission authorized $125,000 for this pier. We got working on it, and we were able to build a better pier by taking an extra $75,000 from the Department of Environment Conservation State Parks. So we're accepting their $75,000 to add to this project to make the proper pier at Paris Landing, in the vicinity of Paris Landing Marina for FY18.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. Any comments or questions from the commission?
Yeah, I have one question. Will this provide access for wheelchair-bound fishermen?
They typically do. I do not know for sure on this one. I can find out for you. I mean, I'm almost certain they do. Every design I see has those cutouts in there.
I would hope it did.
Yeah, we've gone a long way to make sure we've been doing that on our piers.
Is this already built?
No, this is in a contract phase now. And
Okay.
we're eager to we're happy to get their money and get it in the budget so we can
Sure.
get it going.
Okay. Any other comments, questions? Anything from the public? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? All right, number 6.
Okay.
No, I did number 5.
Want me to do this? Okay, I was asked to give a,
I'm sorry, my bad. I'm being corrected. We're doing number 5.
okay.
We did number 4. I got myself out of order.
Okay, I was asked to give a brief Asian carp update today, and this will lead into the actual budget request. So just have a few slides. Most of this shouldn't be new to you, but I want to take the opportunity to do this because the public can see this as well. There have been a few things that have happened since we talked about this in December. The current distribution of Asian carp is pretty similar to what it has been. That light pink area that's moving up the Tennessee River is what's really an issue for us. There's nothing stopping them at the locks. So they're going to keep moving at some rate of speed as they migrate. What is being done about this is a question the public is rightfully asking. There are things that we're doing. We're preventing the projects that we're involved in, all the meetings, all the fundraising that we're doing through the Fish and Wildlife Service is targeted at preventing the movement of carp encouraging more commercial harvest of carp, and we're monitoring the abundance of movements. We've added sampling routines to our routine work to look at carp. We have the university doing research on carp abundance and monitoring of their movements, which will become important as we try to stop them with barriers. As I mentioned, we're requesting federal help. This has become part of a full-time job, just engaging in all the committees to find money to get this work done. So one of the main issues as we come up on the spawning season potentially for carp this year is that we don't want carp moved by bait buckets. It's illegal to dump your bait in the water already. It's illegal to have live Asian carp anywhere. So we have the laws in place, but as these fish could potentially spawn this year, we're at the ready to do more to tell people to watch out that you don't accidentally do this. No one would accidentally, no one, I would hope, do this on purpose, but I think there's a chance someone could do it by accident. So we have these signs up at all the lakes to remind people that the fish are there and that they shouldn't move them. And even at larger sizes, it's not hard to confuse a gizzard shad and a silver carp. Another thing to update you since December, I mentioned that there was going to be a project at Barkley Lock to test underwater sound systems and lights and all that. And there's a bubble curtain as well to help attenuate the sound. That is still in motion. That's completely out of the agency's hands. We've invited them to come anywhere in Tennessee and do this work. They selected the Barkley Lock because it's a good test ground. We have, as of this last week, the guys were out collecting fish. We have over 200 fish in the Tennessee River system and Cumberland system at the ready to test these barriers as these are put in place in the system. But that's still on track. It'll take them a year or so just to evaluate the success of that project. Another thing that's been going on since we last talked about this is the commercial harvest. Just to remind the public, there are commercial commercial markets for carp. It's good product. Demand is increasing. The few people that are selling carp in Tennessee are finding more markets, and their businesses are growing a little bit. And some of that it can be attributed to the investment that the agency made over a year ago now to give them some infrastructure funding. So later, the next presentation I have will mention how we would like to use incentives to subsidize the carp industry at a tune of $250,000 a year. And we are still monitoring carp and sport fish. We've had a lot of people wonder what's going on with our sport fish. We know people are not happy with the situation on Kentucky Lake, Barkley Lakes. We're not either. We are seeing we had a really cold winter. We had a lot of meteorological issues that could attribute to the problems that we're seeing, but we also got a lot of carp out there. So we've got to tease those issues apart. It doesn't even matter if it's really the weather or it's the carp that are causing the problems that we're seeing. We still got to get rid of the carp. So the problem is still there, but as scientists, we kind of want to know what's going on. So that work is still ongoing. Another thing that's happened is we are sponsors of this fishing event that's going on Kentucky Lake. I was talking to the chief of fisheries in Kentucky. He said, hey, we're having this tournament. We're going to fish in Kentucky. Well, how about we fish in Tennessee and Kentucky and make this a joint effort? So we've put a little money into this tournament, and we'll probably have some staff up there helping them out as well. And lastly, in response to a lot of the public concerns, we have scheduled a public meeting for next week, next Thursday, in Henry County, where we're expecting probably hundreds of people to come and hopefully hear what we know. I'll have a much longer presentation about the things that we're doing, and certainly hear their concerns and their suggestions. So that will be hopefully a time to share our information and hear their feedback at that time. We won't be making any recommendations at that meeting. So that was my brief update on where we're at with carp, and I'll transition into that budget request now.
Let me just add one thing. The documents all say $240,000. The budget expansion is actually for $250,000. There was a discrepancy, so everybody be aware of that on the front end.
All right, do we know the
Thank you,
price
Chairman.
per pound on the carp right now? I'm so sorry.
I think he's going to give in this update.
I will, just so you know, it's roughly 13 cents a pound, and we're trying, this incentive program will get us to 20 cents a pound, which seems to be kind of what Kentucky was aiming at with their similar program. So let's get, I've got, like I said, one of the longer budget requests presentations I've had, so I'll move through it quickly if I can hit the buttons. What's going on, Paul? Is it going to make me, have I locked it up? Is that possible? I can do it without the slides. That's the other presentation. That's how far we got before. Okay, great. Just to reiterate the role of Asian carp, or of commercial fishing in Asian carp, they have the ability to reduce carp abundance. It's been demonstrated in other states. Reducing carp abundance helps us reduce that migration rate. The more fish that are out there, the more likely they are to move upstream. They also help us monitor populations. Some of the more rare Asian carp species, like black carp, are being caught solely by commercial fishermen. So after that December meeting where this suggestion was made by Commissioner Cox, we went away and said we were going to do more detailed work on this, and we want to reach out to the commercial fishing community. We had that meeting on April 20th, where they heard the proposal that you're about to hear with a few changes that have happened since then, and they were generally receptive, and they had some comments that we probably need to address, but not all of them need to be addressed within the program. Even they can be additional programs, but generally speaking, no one said we don't want to do this, so we are moving forward. The goals of this program are to reduce the abundance of carp in Kentucky Lake and all the reservoirs on the Cumberland River. We want to increase commercial effort to remove carp, and we want to improve the reliability of supply. That was one of the concerns early on, that nobody wanted to set up a processing house because there wasn't a steady supply of fish coming in. With these three things in motion, we're hoping to encourage processors to operate in the state. And just the mention of this program since the April 20th meeting has already prompted new people calling me asking, where can we come and set up processing places in Tennessee? The incentive guidelines, we're trying to keep this as simple as possible. We need to be fiscally responsible, but it's an incentive program. We have to generate some excitement with it to motivate people. And we want to benefit both the commercial fishermen and the wholesale fish dealers. The previous program only provided funds to the wholesale fish dealers. And we need to have transparency for audit purposes. There's going to be a lot of honor system in this, but there has to be a way for us to track things and check on things as the process moves forward. So there's two types of incentives that we want to fund. We want to do a pay per pound, where we're adding some money per pound of fish that comes into the process. And also we want to provide free gill net webbing to fishers. I'll talk more about that. We had a program where there was a cost share, but we found out that it was probably best for us to deliver it free because we don't have a good administrative way to cost share, it turns out. So on the paper, and really all of these programs are targeting the four major types of Asian carp: silver, bighead, black, and grass carp, and the common carp. The common carp are not really a problem, but they're incidental catch, and again, we're trying to make this interesting for fishermen. If they can get something out of them, that's just more bonus to keep them out fishing. Where are we going to do the work? It will be in the entire lakes of Kentucky, Barkley, Cheatham, and Old Hickory lakes. The fish could be harvested in either state to be eligible. I'll talk more about that. But for a fisherman that's in Tennessee or in Kentucky, that they have to have it be enrolled in their special carp harvest program and have the appropriate licenses. And that's fine, but they can still take those fish that they harvest and bring them to our buyers, and we will pay them. Now, they're not eligible for the payment on the Kentucky side. They can choose. And we're pretty close on cost to where Kentucky is, and we've talked to Kentucky, obviously. We're going to need to rely on Kentucky, as they are us, to work on the auditing of our programs as we move forward. Only Tennessee resident wholesale fish dealers will be eligible. We didn't want to set up shop in Kentucky. It just seemed only fair to use state dollars in the state of Tennessee. But we're not limiting the harvest end of this to either state. We're going to allow resident and non-resident commercial fishing license holders to participate. So here it gets back to that, what does it cost for, what is a marketable fish? Well, really all fish are marketable, but to get the highest price, you're dealing with that human food trade. And 13 cents a pound is right there at what the minimum market price should be. For a fish, this incentive program only applies to fish that are in this market. So if a guy comes in with a fish that the buyer's only willing to pay 10 cents for, he can do that, but he's not getting our 7 cents, and the buyer's not going to get, the commercial fisherman's not going to get paid, and the buyer's not going to get paid. He brings in a marketable fish and gets the 13 cents a pound. Now the commercial fisherman will get 7 cents a pound, and with that incentive, he essentially has now 20 cents a pound in his pocket. The fisher will be paid at the transaction by the buyer. He's not waiting for a check from us. The buyer becomes an important part of this in handling the money, as you'll see. So only Tennessee wholesale fish dealers would be eligible to participate as a contractor. A contractor are people that respond to the RFP, request for proposal, and there can be multiple contractors. We don't know how many we can support yet. Depends on how much money we have and how eligible everyone is. There's going to be minimum criteria to be a contractor. And in this RFP process, we can include things that would be rules, so to speak, without going through a rule process. And we can set up paperwork requirements and such. So that's a benefit of going through this contract system. So the wholesale fish dealer would then, after he's given 7 cents to the commercial fisherman at the time of the transaction, we count up all those events, and then we give them 10 cents back for each event. So he's netting 3 cents a pound as the buyer. And then the wholesale fish dealer is reimbursed monthly. We had hoped to do this every 2 weeks. Turns out contract language says the fastest we can do that is monthly. So the next part of the program is this free gillnet webbing. And so what we would be doing is providing webbing to the contractor. Again, we're not dealing directly with the commercial fishermen. We're giving it to the contractors that are signed up in this program or been awarded this program, and they hand out the webbing. We would provide webbing for up to 15 fishers to start the program, and it's roughly about 15 nets worth of product at a value of about $1,000 per fisherman. The priority for who gets free gear would be the current commercial Asian carp fishers. We'll probably have some other minimum criteria, like got to have a license, got to have some other criteria. But after that, we're going to have the buyers hand out the netting on first come, first served basis. It's the only way to be fair after that until supplies run out. Now, these nets don't last forever. So they would be, if they're fishing hard, they'll probably burn through these nets in 6 months, handling the pounds of fish that they expect to do. So we felt that it would be, we don't want somebody coming back for more nets unless they've shown that they've used the nets they got first. So we figured a fair low bar to reach would be about 60,000 pounds of carp in 6 months. And this is, anybody that's really putting any effort towards removing carp should be able to hit this number. And we talked to commercial fishermen about this threshold as well. An important thing to know about what we're giving to these fishermen is that it's raw materials to build commercial nets. It's webbing. It's not the whole thing with the floats and the lead lines and all. They have to take money out of their pocket to have the net constructed to their specifications. They like to use different length nets, or they'll do it themselves. Either way, if you're giving a guy $1,000 worth of webbing, he's probably got $300 to $400 worth of work to do to get it in the water. So there is a cost share in this. It's not just something for nothing. So let's circle back to the role of the contractors in this that get 3 cents a pound for their trouble. One of the questions that I get a lot is, well, why pay them anything? They're getting the fish. They should be able to make money off the fish. But they're performing a lot of services for us. They're handling these transactions of paying the fishermen their incentives right up front, which has been a problem for past programs. They're providing reports to TWRA. We're going to be in their business a little more than usual trying to keep up with all these transactions, so they'll have to put up with us. And they'll be coordinating the fishing effort to meet daily demand. They don't want fishermen coming in with fish that have no market. So it's on them to have this organized, and the better they are they have to be good at developing the market to have more fish to come in to get their 3 cents a pound. So it gives them an incentive to get bigger. That's what we're thinking here. And they're going to, as I mentioned, they're going to distribute the netting materials, which we are not allowed to do. And they're going to hopefully recruit new fishermen. Now, this won't be, a requirement, but I'm hoping if they're going to have bigger markets to make more money through the system, they'll have to get more fishermen out there. And we hope they'll cooperate with us, and our understanding is that they already are, to find solutions for unmarketable fish. One of the things that the commercial fishermen brought up during the meeting was that what do we do if we get fish that they're just too short, or we can't sell them today because we all had a really good day and there's extra fish, we can't sell them. That goes on now a little bit. It'll continue to go on. Well, we made some calls to people that may be able to take those unmarketable fish, and it sounds like they're already creating some cooperation between businesses to find places to put those fish. And this project is dealing with marketable, these high-end marketable fish at 13 cents a pound. We can do other things to work on those smaller fish down the road, but we've got to keep this thing moving to get this in place by this fall when the fishing can get really good. So just to recap, the pay per the pound program would take, we could use 200,000 a year. That would pull 2 million pounds of carp out of these reservoirs. Kentucky's program is targeting 3 million pounds out of the same reservoirs. So if you combine the two, you're looking at 5 million pounds coming out of there. I think I'd love to see them take more out every year, but I think this 2 million pound mark will push them beyond what they've been doing. They're doing around a million and some, but they have not taken 2 million pounds out in Tennessee. The gill net webbing would cost us another $30,000. We'd like to have another $20,000 for expenses that may come up for administration or auditing, paperwork, just whatever. If there's some solution, some problem that we need to fix with a little bit of money, we want to have it at the ready and not come back to you for it. So it's a total of $250,000 a year. We would like to do this for 2 years and see how it goes. And the intention isn't that we do this forever. We'd like to think that these businesses will get going, get started, and be less reliant on it. If there is a year 3 proposal and we're satisfied with what we've done in the first 2, I would imagine it would look different than what we're doing now. It would be. So these are the next steps pending an approval. This is the step today is the budget approval by this commission. Next, that would put this money in an FY19 budget. We will complete the RFP with the help of General Services and have something that we could execute in early July, we would hope. Every step after that takes time. That execution is going to take some time, some approval with different agencies. Then we have to select the contract, the people that apply. We have to screen them and then award contracts. Then there'll probably be some more paperwork. I'm imagining weeks of time at each step of this, but I'd still like to get this thing in place in September. And we would review the programs semi-annually just to see how we're doing. And there's no reason to not seek additional sources of funding. I mean, TVA has mentioned that they're interested in carp removal. Other nonprofits have been interested in carp removal. Nobody's for everybody wants carp out of the lake. I mean, the latest tournament activity in this month has really gotten a lot of people's attention to know how big a problem carp are in the lake, and so there may be some time for, there'd be a lot of public support for funding this sort of thing, I believe. So with that, that is the formal budget request is for FY 19 and 20 for $250,000 each year. And this would come out of the Marine Fuel Tax Fund, which I think is good because this isn't the fisherman's problem. It's everybody in the state's problem. The people that are putting money or fuel in their boats, that's fishermen and boaters, so this will help address it through that fund.
All right, I'll take a motion. Second? All right, discussions.
In your sampling, what's the average weight of an individual fish?
Right now, maybe over 80% of the fish in the lake are 3-year-old fish, and I believe they're running like 10-pound-ish, like yay big. I haven't been on the water long enough or recently enough to know, but that cohort is out there, and they're big enough to spawn. That's what concerns me right now, more so. But so they're marketable. They're a good size to keep. Some smaller fish are being observed. We think they are coming through the system. They're migrating in.
I would just, if they're 10 pounds, that's 200,000 fish. That's not a lot of fish. I'm saying it's gonna take a lot of time and a lot of money to try to make a real dent in them, to get them out of there. 2 million pounds, if they're 10 pounds a piece is, there are a lot of fish out there. That's not, I don't think that's a lot. Anyway, I support it.
Commissioner Baker.
Frank, I got a few questions. I don't think there's a bigger issue that this commission is going to face than what we're talking about today. If you think the hogs were a problem, you hadn't seen anything compared to what these carp are going to do to these local economies, these sport fishing economies across our state, all the way through the valley. It is, without a doubt, the biggest problem that this agency is going to face. I would say it'll be worse than CWD when it gets here, in my opinion. I think it's going to be that big an impact. But I got a few questions. Our goal, what is our goal? Is it just to reduce somewhat of the numbers? What is your long-term goal?
I think right now, while these fish are in an encroachment phase, they're not near the numbers they could be once they get established. If they've only had one successful year class in the last 5, if they start reproducing every year, their numbers could be a lot bigger. We're at a time now where I think we got a better chance of controlling their numbers now while the population is still growing than we do later. So the goal is to reduce the numbers, to not only reduce the risk to the ecosystem and to people boating that could get hit by these jumping fish, but also to reduce the likelihood that they are moving upstream through the dam. So it's to get the numbers low. Eradication is not a realistic goal right now. It's to keep the numbers down while we wait for that silver bullet that can eradicate them. I would like to see them commercially overfished forever.
Gotcha.
That's what I'm thinking.
That leads to my next question.
Yeah.
Right now, we don't allow commercial fishing in Big Sandy or Duck River. Are we going to lift that because that's where they're at right now? I mean, that's where they're breeding, that's where they're spawning. All the guys that are out there tournament fishing are looking at their graphs, and those areas are just loaded up. Are we going to open up those areas to commercial fishing?
Those areas are open at night, but there was a request from the commercial fishermen to allow them to stay in there longer. Right now, it's set up where commercial fishermen have to be out of there by like early dawn or something like that. They got to get all their gear and get out of there before the crappie fishermen come in to fish. Crappie fishing is just as important, it's very important to that part of the world for sure. So there's been a long time user conflict for those waters, and believe me, the commercial fishermen would like to get in there for Asian carp, and they'd like to get in there for buffalo and some other species. We're still weighing how important, can we control this population and maintain the current solution to that conflict, or do we have to let them into these embayments? I'm getting mixed reports from commercial fishermen of how critical it is to get in there. Others have no problem getting fish, and others say, oh, I just have to be in there. So, and they're not in those embayments all the time either. And if they're spawning, they're not successful at all. We've got no output out of those systems. We're still learning where these fish spawn, and that's, if we do learn that they're in an area where they're highly vulnerable to being removed, then yes, we want to come and bring you recommendations to make that happen.
I mean, I seen a live video of 2 weeks ago of guys idling in Big Sandy and fish jumping up out of the back. So they're,
Yeah.
I mean, behind their boats in the boat wake, they're there. I don't think that your sport fishermen, they have had many conflicts in the past, but they also understand, the sport fishermen understand that if we don't do something quickly, there won't be a crappie to catch back there in the back of those flats. And the bass are having so much competition out on the ledges right now. I feel like we're really underfunding this thing. I think we ought to be talking 4 times as much, because you let these fish spawn 2 more years, we are going to be fighting the biggest epidemic we've ever seen. We're trying to throw a teacup full of water on a bonfire right now, and we're going to have to get some big fire trucks out and get after it. Now, I do have a problem using the fuel tax money to fund this. That fuel tax money was set up. I had some influence in trying to get that done, and I helped Chris get it done. It was set up for user access, for new boat ramps, and new parking lots. If we can take $460,000 and want to go close some oil wells with wetlands, with the wetlands fund, I don't understand why we can't use the wetlands funds that we've got millions of dollars sitting out there to combat this problem when we told everybody that we were going to use the fuel tax money to build boat ramps and lake access across the state. And that's for, you know, constituents up in my area. We don't have the carp problem yet, but I realize how important the carp problem is. It is huge. It's the biggest thing we're ever going to face, I promise you. That being said, I would suggest we look at using wetlands money and not taking the fuel tax money away from different people's groups to fund this project. And I would suggest that we triple or quadruple the amount you're wanting to spend. I want these things to be overfished today. And limiting buyers just from Tennessee, you're limiting the market. I think if our goal is to overfish them, I think you ought to. Do we have a limit on them? I know, like on paddlefish, we only allow so many out-of-resident commercial fishermen. Is there a limit on out-of-state commercial fishermen for this type of fish?
Those depends on what state they're with. Depends on if they let our people fish in their state. With Kentucky, we've not had a problem with that. We can get enough commercial fishermen out of Kentucky that are going to want to do this with this program the way it is.
I'd like to see be open to anybody from any state that thinks he can make a living down here trying to catch these fish, trying to eradicate them as much as we can. Because if we don't get a control of it quick, we have got a terrible, terrible problem. And I think we're really looking at underfunding this situation. And very few times you'll ever hear me sit on this commission and ask for more money. But this is one time that we definitely are underfunding the situation in the way I'm looking at things.
I totally agree with Commissioner Baker that, you know, this isn't a disaster waiting to happen. It's happening. You know, we have a disaster, and you know, the sources of funding are always difficult. But yeah, it'd be great if we could use the wetlands fund somehow. But isn't there also some federal legislation possibly about funding this?
The federal allocations are really tricky to predict. I mean, there's the funding that we get now, when we get our next allotment, we'll have received $500,000, but it is specific to projects that they want us to do, that we agreed to do, in the state, and it's not removal of fish. It's doing the research to understand the movement of these fish up the system so that the barriers, which could potentially stop the fish from getting to East Tennessee, can get put in place. That's a current priority. There's other legislation out there, but it's like, you know, there's a bill here, there's a bill there. I don't know what's going to get traction. There's one little tiny pot of money that's coming that's earmarked only for contract commercial fishing, which it's like $50,000 we might be able to get, and it would probably go to Mississippi to start working on those less abundant populations where it's not commercially feasible to fish them. If there's not a lot of fish there, you got to pay somebody to go do it, basically. So, but yeah, the federal money has not been raining down on Mississippi Valley like it has on the Great Lakes. They get tens and tens of millions of dollars a year. We do not in the South. We have support from our representatives in Washington, but we don't have a champion that's willing to get that kind of money for us.
It might not be real socially unpopular, but we own enough WMAs around the lake, and we own backhoes and dump trucks. If you guys are looking at a market all the time where they can sell that fish, what if we just dig a hole, net them, set up a set of scales there, and pay these commercial fishermen to get them out of the water, and just put a Asian carp landfill on our WMAs, cover them up when we're done. I mean, yeah, and just pay the commercial fishermen to get rid of them. If there's not a big enough market to sell that many fish fries, let's figure out how to get rid of them instead of trying to go through. I mean, the business model is you only have so big a market out here right now for them. We're getting ready to go after these fish the way they need to be gone after. You're going to create a whole lot more product than you got the end user for. Is a problem. These fish are growing by the thousands of pounds every second we're sitting here talking about it. As many fish are in that lake right now, and those are moving upriver. I mean, they're going into Pickwick, and it won't be long before they're to Chickamauga and Watts Bar. And you talk about influx, the economies all up and down the whole Tennessee River. If we don't get on this problem right now, I mean, we've got serious problems. So, have you thought about?
We have. The initial offering, if you will, was $100,000 for working on this, and we quickly realized if we want to exceed what's going on now, we needed to jump up this $250,000. As far as just digging holes and paying people to do it, I think we are looking at 4 times as much cost per year. We're trying to do something that would be this is the low-hanging, this is the easy thing to do for the marketable fish, and the market is growing, and I think they're going to overfish them like they have in Illinois, where some of the people that have come down to talk to me are Illinois businessmen that say we're done up there. There's no big fish anymore, and they're coming to talk to us, which is not really great news, but I guess it's good that they're coming here. So, and as far as working outside of the state, I don't know if we had limitations on that through general services or not. But my thinking is that we have a product, we have an incentive program that can address what's happening now. I'd like to get it on the ground. If we want to do something else again, that could be another project. This is not like we can only have one, I don't think.
I would make an amendment to, can we fund it through the wetlands? If we can close oil and gas wells with wetland dollars, can we fund this through wetland dollars, Director Carter?
No, sir, Commissioner. The wetlands fund's very specific, either land acquisition or maintenance on WMAs. It's the only 2 things it can be used for, other than paying in lieu of taxes on property.
Were you not under the impression that fuel tax money was designed for build access points and boat ramps?
I know that was a huge part of the ask in going into that, but actually going through the legislative process, one of the things that came up on the floor was, could we fund some things for Asian carp? And the very first payment we made was to a group in Henry County for Asian carp control. It actually says for projects on the water, and we felt like that this would qualify as a definite project on the water, and the need was there.
Commissioner Woodson?
You may not know the answer to this, so you can feel free to email it to us later. Can you compare the budgets for the hog eradication program and Asian carp eradication? I can't recall how much we spent on that.
There is no
program.
budget for Asian carp, just as a strict eradication. I'd have to develop one if we were going to start digging holes and all that. I don't even know where to begin. I don't have a tractor.
Incentive slash the efforts to reduce the population.
Right.
Would this be the beginning? I mean, would this be the start? I'm trying to understand like how much we've invested in the hog eradication program, which is nationally renowned and aggressive, compared to.
You mean on a national scale or a Tennessee
No, just
scale?
Tennessee.
Okay.
Can I help on this?
That'd be great.
Commissioner, it's been hard to come up with the exact amount of money that we used on hog eradication or hog control, really. Our budgets generally ran around $60,000 of actual materials in a year. That did not include employee costs. If you include employee costs in that, it went up as high as about $700,000.
Commissioner Cox?
I'm not going to disagree with anything you're saying. I don't think we got enough money to dig a hole and put these fish in. So obviously the goal is to get a market for them. I think we're do what? You don't have, if you've got more product, then you have a market to go to. Well, in my conversations with Frank and others, the market is increasing. California, I think you said, they're making fish patties and feeding them to school kids. So the market is increasing. The best way to do this is let it be self-funded and let the free market take care of it. I don't think we got enough money to dig a hole and put these fish in. I get what you're saying. I mean, but right now, I think catching the fish that we're going to catch will supply the market, but hopefully it's just going to keep going and capitalism will take care of it. I'm not disagreeing with you, but I don't think we got enough money. I think if you hired 1,000 fishermen to catch them, you'd catch more than the market could stand, and you bury them, they're just going to be right back. The market's got to take care of it, in my opinion. I'm not going to disagree with you. I just don't think we can afford to dig a hole and put them in it.
Well, we got 160,000 acres out there and 2,400 miles of shoreline on one lake, and we've got it in 4 or 5 lakes. But the biggest lake is, right now on Kentucky Lake. And we're talking about, how many nets we're talking about? 15? How many nets did you have?
Well, right now, there's like a handful of people that are harvesting the fish. One of the complaints that the processors have, a lot of these fish that are harvested in Tennessee do end up in Kentucky where they're doing their final processing. The argument or the complaint that we're hearing is that there's not enough people fishing for them. They have the market. They just need people willing to switch over from their current species that they're targeting and get on carp.
Well, let's pay more than the 7 cents to the fisherman. I mean, I don't care if that guy buys a new house or a new truck or whatever. If he can make him enough money, we incentivize it enough where he can go make a good living at it. He wants to go catch them. That's what our end goal is to get rid of them. So let's make sure we're not throwing pennies out there to them. Let's make sure that we're getting it where that commercial fisherman can make some money doing this instead of fishing for another type of species. Because if not, they are going to overtake our lake in a hurry.
Commissioner Stroud? Commissioner King?
At the meeting that Frank had with commercial fishermen there in Paris, they were very open, receptive. They didn't act like this was something, we're not interested in lukewarm. It seems to me that if you, in some discussions Frank and I've had also, we're learning some things from Kentucky, some of the mistakes they made with some of their money. We don't want to just throw a bunch of money and waste it either. So, we need to really, it seems like a small step, but I don't know. It seems like a good plan to me right now. Even though, and I'm the probably love crappie fishing more than anybody sitting up here, and at Big Sandy's where we go. And so, as we speak, they're rolling in here. The texts are rolling in here. Don't go to Big Sandy. don't go to BS is what comes over all the time. Nobody's catching them. The carp are everywhere. I know, it's horrible, horrible. It breaks my heart. But we also don't want to just think money, throwing them at whatever's going to help. We've got to find the good plan and then make good steps towards it. So, and I think I really appreciate your having that meeting and hearing from them, and the one that's coming up.
Yeah.
Because another thing I hear is, why doesn't TWA do something about it? It's like, well, we're trying. And the perception, especially in that area, is that we're doing nothing. And we've been behind the 8 ball. Behind the whatever on it, whatever the saying is. We've been behind that and not catching up with Kentucky. That's been the perception. So we need to do a better job on reaching out to the fishermen. And we're doing that, I think. But maybe there's other things we could do to let them know we do understand and we are working hard at it.
How many people do we have right now, commercial fishermen, do you think we have signed up to fish for these things?
Our commercial fishing coordinator tells me we have like probably around 5 or 6 people that have commercial licenses that are actively pursuing these fish. And we have like 200 and some commercial fishermen out there. You're more likely to recruit someone that's already got the boat and gear and know-how than you do getting somebody off the street to go in. So again, this is an approach to recruit the easy recruits into an industry that's just getting started and has had a lot of starts and stops. But now we instead of having no processors in Tennessee, we have one processor in Tennessee now, and he's the one that is selling product to the West Coast. And there's no limit to the amount of millions of pounds they can sell as fish sticks with this product. It's good stuff. And they're buying the machinery to fillet the fish. They have the processing gear. This is happening with or without us, but the thinking is that we need to really help them now while they're just getting started to get them firmly, foot on the ground in the game here and be successful at starting an industry that can run them down.
Okay, what's going to happen when that commercial fisherman catches that 3-pound fish and the guy filleting, the processor, he wants an 8 or a 10-pound fish? Is that commercial fisherman going to throw that 3-pounder to the side and so he can fill his boat full of 8 and 10-pounders, and we're going to watch that 3-pounder spawn some more?
No, I would say if it came out of the gill net, that 3-pounder's got a fairly low chance of survival anyway. So he may go back and die, which would be fine with me. But if he brought him into the processor, part of that cooperative I was talking about is if they have a fish that they can't take, they will put it in this other bin for the organic fertilizer stuff. There needs to be other parts of this thing to deal with them short fish. The other thing is they're setting gill nets based on the size of the fish. If they're setting gill nets to catch 12-pound fish, they're not going to catch 3-pound fish. And they know better than to go out and catch the wrong size fish. So if we get to a point where we have a lot of small fish in there and we don't feel like the commercial market and the industry in general is addressing the small fish problem, that's a separate problem we need to address. And I think we need to do that, but it's not this program. But this is what we're talking about today. Please, let's get started on this.
Oh, I want to go 4 times bigger than you are right now, because I just think we're throwing a small cup of water on it to get started. I really and truly do. And we were talking, if you only got 5 boats out there fishing right now, I mean, how do we get 100 boats out there fishing? Yeah, you make it 7, but I think you put 15 cents on it or something that's on up there where you can get these guys out there and make a dent in it before, because you're talking about that many millions of fish spawning, it's going to go poof.
Well, the number, of course, if we ask the commercial fishing community how high should we go, there's no limit to it. They're going to want it as much as possible. We're trying to pick a responsible point where we know they'll fish and they'll keep fishing, and that's the feedback we've gotten has been this point. And we also wanted to mirror Kentucky so we don't disrupt what they're doing. If we're giving it away down here and we're distracting from what they're doing, we need to have an additive product between Kentucky and Tennessee.
Commissioner Cox.
Director Carter, or Bob Eaton, whoever, is there any way to use Wallop Road money, fish restoration money for this?
I'm not sure. I have to go back and look exactly, like if we were talking wildlife restoration, on the PR side, I can tell you that there's real restrictions on reduction of wildlife. On the fishery side, I'm not sure, Frank. I'd have to look.
I don't know.
Maybe you could go back and find out, because I don't know how much that fund provides, but that might be a source for this money or more money.
We utilize, we don't have enough Wallop Row money now to fund the programs we have, so even if it was allowable, it would not make a difference in this program unless we got more money.
Commissioner Baker, I agree with, again, everything you're saying, but I think this is a start. Hopefully, we can burn through this money pretty quickly. It means we've caught a bunch of fish, and we've got a lot of people out there working on it. And yes, we need more funding sources, but this is what we have available to us now, and I say we get started on that. And so.
All right. At this point, I will call for the vote. All in favor to start with this program here as proposed, $250,000 per year for the next 2 years, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
All right, Ken, we're up. Can you believe it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank everybody in the audience for staying just to hear me present.
I've been waiting, Ken. I know they have to.
There's a three-page, either in your book, could be front and back, or on your iPad, for the financial report, and I'm reporting through the month of March on our 4 funds. At the top of the page, the boating fund through March is approximately 5.6% less than what we had collected at this point in time last year, and we're slightly over halfway expense-wise through the annual allotment. Middle of the page, the wildlife fund, we're approximately 15% ahead of projection for the year. Our expenses are approximately 56% of the allotment. At the bottom of the page, I've detailed both endowments. The watchable endowment has a balance of $6.5 million, of which $2,000 is available to transfer. And the lifetime sportsman has approximately $51 million. The very bottom of the page is a static computation of what we include each month. It shows of the lifetime sportsman holders who are actually eligible to hunt and fish in 17, and what the percent to the total combo hunt and fish sold for the same point in time, and the value of those, if they had bought licenses, would have been $7.3 million. On the second page, at the top, is the Wetlands Acquisition Fund. The balance is approximately $11.3 million. We zeroed the maintenance out, as we usually do, the maintenance fund. And the compensation, or in lieu of tax, has $868,000. As of day before yesterday, we received the certification for the in lieu of tax payments to the counties. And it's approximately, for this year, it's approximately $443,000. Those payments, pretty lengthy process of reviewing and certifying and putting them into the system, but they should be paid by the first of the week, which means the county should have them by the end of next week or the first of the week after. The last page is the condition of our investments or investment funds that we have with the Treasury. This is through the month of April. It's a little bit more current than the actual expense and revenue that I presented on the other funds. We're approximately 0.5%, or we lost approximately 0.5% of the value in April, but we're still at 1.6% of an increase since the inception of the fund. Are there any questions?
I have two. How much did you say the tax payments were?
approximately 443,000.
And that's coming out of wetlands, correct?
It's coming out of in lieu. Yeah, I think it's 443, 202, 33.
Okay. And on the boating registration, where we're showing 2.8, in the budget that we passed, we have license and registration. Is that the same number? Or is there a different component besides registration? And if you need to look, that's fine, but I mean,
You talking about the 3-year comparison?
no, I'm talking about
Where you have three column budget?
in the budget, it says for the current year, we had license registration of 8.3 million.
That's either license in wildlife or boating registration in boating. And then there's a combination, the third page, that shows the total for the agency.
Yeah, and I'm
which
just
would be
looking specifically at boating.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to see this $8 million number, how that compares to the boating registration number that you're showing us.
That's the amount that would come out of the boating fund in order to help fund that total amount of the spending level for boating.
Okay.
It wouldn't be just registration, but it would be the amount that would be
That's what I was
identified
trying to get at.
for the boating
Okay.
fund.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? That's not actionable, right? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And that concludes the non-committee portion of the budget.
Thank you, Chairman Sanders. And now I'd like to recognize Chairman Stroud of the Government Relations Committee.
Thank you, Chairman. Chair recognizes Bobby Wilson.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman Stroud. Several months ago, this commission approved the Threatened Endangered Species List Rule 1660-1-32. Recently, the Joint Government Operations Committee met to consider it, and they were approached by at least one group, maybe more, with some concerns they had about the regulatory process, maybe some potential impacts as a result of the new list. They've asked for a delay so that they could work out some of their concerns with the Department of Environment and Conservation. Not us, but Department of TDEC. And so I'm coming to you to ask for your approval for this stay of the effective date of the rules. It's been about 75 days. I think August the 29th is a day, and hopefully they'll work things out.
Okay, so Bobby, what do we need to do for
Just
it?
vote in favor of it or vote against
Okay,
it.
do we need a motion and a second?
No, you don't have to do that.
Okay, so all those that are for this signify by saying aye. Aye. And noes? You got it. Bobby.
Very much. That's
Yes,
it.
sir. That's it, Chairman.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank the commission very much. It's been a very busy 2 months, and we've done a lot of good work the last couple of days. These are the 2 longest commission meetings I think we've ever had. And I'd like to thank the agency. We've worked on this for 2 months. Y'all worked on it for 6 or 8 months. So thank you very much for plugging away. So next meeting, our next commission meeting, we do not have anything in June. Next commission meeting is in July in Chattanooga. We're being hosted by Commissioners Sanders and Swan. That's July 12th and 13th in Chattanooga. So thank y'all very much.
I sent everybody an email, and I know this is in code, but there's evidently a move to allow Blaze Pink along with Blaze Orange as a safety color, and for the women that might be involved in future sports and hunting and all, and I thought I'd put it out there. So whatever we need to do, if it's something to consider to maybe next year's legislative, if that would be something we could use, might be that.
Commissioner Holbert.
I can see where Commissioner Cox would want to wear pink. I understand that it's your battle, and I want to support you.
Getting everybody up here.
I'll take that as a motion to adjourn.